Thank you very much. I've been dithering about how to start this session, and I sort of want to make a personal statement, and then I didn't want to make it, and then I did want to make it, and then I didn't want to make it, and I finally decided that although it'll take a minute or two, it actually, the odyssey that I've been on regarding open access starts here in this city. And it starts in 1970 when I came here as a student. And I then had an American passport. And I went from West Berlin to East Berlin in 1970. Most of you weren't even born then. But it's quite something to have, certainly was then, guys with machine guns aimed at you. And I realized when I was in East Berlin what a tragedy it was that the young people I was meeting didn't have access to the things I had to read. Well, it took me a long time to come back. I came back in 2006 when I was meeting somebody from Stanford who was on sabbatical here, and the object of the meeting was to set up another meeting between him and somebody else. That was Larry Lessig, co-founder of Creative Commons, and the other person was the chief legal counsel of Elsevier. Now you can imagine, those of you who are old enough, what that was like in 2006. Well, the next time I came was 2009 to this conference, and I was talking about my new initiative at Bloomsbury Academic to make monographs open access and see what happens, because we had no idea. But I made the meeting, entirely disrupted the meeting, and Arnold told me today that it cost him a lot of money because I insisted on reorganizing the schedule so that we could all see over the internet the inauguration of Barack Obama. And it was a very moving and uplifting time, a time of hope. 2009 may seem a long time ago, but it actually isn't. My next visit was in 2013. I was at Manchester University Press then, and I was also setting up Knowledge Unlatched. Boy, was it hard to get a handful of publishers to try the business model. But I had a few, and some of you in the room. Thank you. 2016, when I came back again, it was time to hand KU over to Sven Fund, who's in the room, and most of you know Sven. And he's doing a great job at growing KU. I then concentrated on KU research, and I will be talking a little bit about that in a moment. It's all about getting the data analytics around books, the sort of discussions that you had yesterday, we have around books, and the research that we do. And so I'm here today to say that now that it's 2018, I'm stepping down from KU Research, and Cameron Nayland will be my successor, and many of you know him. So this has been quite an odyssey coming in and out of Berlin over the last few decades. Now, after Ilko and Niels and I did the study, the landscape study, I was invited to do some lectures in Australia. So I was trying to think, well, how do I organize this question, making OA work for books? And I came up with an octagon with 8 sectors, so looking at OA policies, funding for OA books, publishing, infrastructure, authors and readers, content and services, metrics, and libraries. And these are the segments that need to up their game and get involved and engaged and work together to make open access work for books. But actually, it's more like this. Why is it such a mess? Well, it's actually a mess because all these different segments are moving forward, and they are moving forward at different speeds, at different rates, at different levels of awareness. And of course, it's all happening in different countries. So what I want to see is a nice round circle with all these segments working together well. Now, in our landscape study, we were asked to look at policies, funding, and publishing models. We thought we should do something about metrics, and we did. And there's an excellent chapter by Ronald Schneider on what's happening in that sphere. But I'm going to show you a few little examples. So to begin with, as Ilka said, I'm going to talk a little bit about publishing. And the roadmap for this very short sentence area is types of publishing, funding models, costs of publishing, and transitioning to open access. So with types of publishing, as Ilka said, we found basically 4 types: traditional university presses, traditional commercial presses, new university presses, and academic-led presses. And we wanted to see where they got their money from to go open access. And we decided that in order to set up a sort of schema for funding models, we would simply follow the money. So, first stop, BPC, paid for by research funder. Like the Wellcome Trust, that's really very simple. Many of you have had funding for books coming out of the Wellcome Fund program. But we looked at all the different countries, and of course the one that everybody's watching at the moment is what's happening in the UK with Hefke, who has said they would like to mandate books going open access. Problem is, we don't know when. They're working on it, but we have 2 big obstacles. One is Hefke's being reorganized, as David Sweeney said, and the other is my country is having a collective nervous breakdown, by something you all have heard about. So until we move a little bit forward with that, we won't know. But when Hefke does mandate, and it may be some time, that will be a game changer. So then we looked at BPCs paid for by author institutions. And this can be either from central funds or department funds for one reason or another. It's a little bit more prevalent coming out of the continental countries than the UK, but nevertheless, it happens. It is happening. And it's growing in the UK because institutions see OA as a way of being able to measure impact more than with closed monographs that sell very few copies. So then the next model, 3, is the membership model. And actually, there's an American case that's the best example of this. A bunch of Oberlin colleges came together and pooled money and have committed to publishing 60 new books in open access, various other bells and whistles with them, and University of Michigan Press has the contract to publish. Then the 4th model is crowdfunding. There's Knowledge Unlatched, which you've heard a little bit about, and I guess most of you know how that works. If you don't, Sven's in the room, Max is in the room. Please see them. And let them tell you about the new innovations that they're doing, because KU is kind of a sandpit to experiment. And if you want to play with a Knowledge Unlatched, please do so. Language Science Press did, and it's been very successful. And it's a slightly different model because it's crowdsourcing from 3 stakeholders. Institutions that are concentrating on linguistics, libraries, and individuals. And so that's working quite well. Model 5, embedded institutional support. We found particularly in the continental countries that a lot of the work that has to be done to publish a book is being done inside institutions and not costed. And that is a problem when you're trying to compare commercial companies where everything is costed and university presses where you hide the cost somehow. And then the sixth model is full institutional funding. The poster child for this is the wonderful UCL Press, which is doing very innovative things as well as being born digital and born open access. And there are other smaller such initiatives around. And that's in the UK, but new ones, but there are older ones also on the continent that operate like that. They're a bit smaller. So I've been talking about BPCs, book processing charges, but is a BPC like an APC? Actually, it's not. It covers what does it cover? Does it cover partial or full publishing costs? Is it income substitution, total income substitution? What's the impact of other formats? All of these are movable pieces because at Bloomsbury, we were selling, and I believe they still are, selling as many in print as they would have if the book was closed, even though the books are on open access. Individuals want to buy them for their libraries, so that's good. But for how long will that be the case? Does it include profit or surplus? Well, at the moment, we don't have enough experience. We haven't got large enough data sets to say anything about this. But this is the big question. And this is the question that's going to come out of discussions with David Sweeney. Charge, does it equal cost? Well, probably not. And we all know what goes into the cost of publishing. As publishers, we kind of have internalized this, and we don't understand why everybody else doesn't get it. Now, going back to the study, we found that the BPCs, the charges, were actually a very big range, from 500 euros to 18,000. But they were offering different services and different licenses. And I won't go into detail here, but the landscape study does do so. We found that in transitioning to OA, some university presses are already a cost center, and so transitioning to OA is not really a cost issue, it's a skills issue, and training people and getting new types of people to make the most of OA, legacy issues. So we then looked at where else there's some money, and again, this is a continental tradition of buybacks of print, a couple of hundred copies of a monograph that might be bought back by a sponsor or funder. And this money can so easily be redirected. So getting from here to OA, there's a lot going on at different speeds. Publishers now seem to accept OA and BPCs and gold model. OA, for those authors who understand it, there are some terrific benefits, and there's lots been written about that. But the traditional systems will coexist even as more goes OA, and that all stakeholders need to support the infrastructure development and streamlining. And that's kind of similar to what was being said yesterday in the world of journals. So now I want to talk a little bit about metrics, and it's kind of a bridge between a landscape study which didn't concentrate on that, but something that KU Research has been doing a lot of work on, and which will lead on to Ross's talk, I hope. We did at KU Research, we've done a number of studies. And I want to show you the results just to show, it's sort of the tip of the iceberg of what we can find. And I think it's really very exciting. So we did something for JSTOR, looking at the JSTOR platform, which had just opened up to hosting open access books. We were commissioned by 4 university presses. UCL was the Born Digital, Born OA. The other 3 were traditional but active in OA. And we found, this was the database. It's actually about 2,500 books that are in the JSTOR platform, on the platform in its gated area, and 113 which were now in the open access space. And so here are some findings. And we looked at what was happening over a 2-year period, but bear in mind that some of the books had not been published for 2 years. But anyway, here's what we found. And it's the different university presses, all 4 of them. Obviously, the one on the right is UCL Press. But what we're comparing, the blue is open access events, whether it's download or views only. And when we compare the small number of OA books with the larger number of gated books, then it is just astonishing, those ratios. We looked at where referrals were coming from, and they were coming primarily from JSTOR and then from Google Scholar. These are all just things that you can find out. And of course, the big scientific publishers know all of this, but for smaller university presses and commercial presses in the humanities and social sciences, this can be very important data to figure out what they should be doing next. And although Ilko talked about 65% books being published by the Big Four, 1,200 publishers were involved in the REF, the Research Excellence Framework Review, in 2014, which just shows that scholars in the humanities and social sciences publish all over the place. And we saw that things were fairly similar when we compared the 4 presses. The previous slide was the aggregation. And we looked at behavior in proportion of events and who downloaded and who just simply viewed, and compared that, and obviously a little slightly higher on views, but a substantial number of downloads. We looked at readers' behavior in proportion of downloaded chapters. And most interestingly is this slide, which you can't see very well, but the bottom line of this is that 90% of readers downloaded 1 or 2 chapters only. Now, how do you interpret this? My view is that younger readers, students, are trying to zero in on exactly what they want. We know that. But when this starts to be known more in the humanities and social science community, it could just change, not hugely, but it could change the way the book is written so that there's this communication between author and reader on how to make that book more usable. Well, we didn't know this sort of thing until we were able to get these stats. We looked at where the readers were, and 42% were in the United States. But then we normalized according to the number of research institutions per country, which is kind of the issue that Rick was raising about something else. But here we found that in terms of numbers of research institutions, the most popular countries using this were, not surprisingly, the developing countries, with the Philippines as number 1 and Uzbekistan as number 2. And we looked at that per publishing company as well. We did a few other things that we thought were pretty. We looked at clouds, looking at word clouds, looking at OA versus non-OA. And so there really is, and I have to say this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we can find through the tools that we've developed. But the platforms like JSTOR are very powerful mechanisms for discoverability, visibility, and use of OA. The next study, which I'll say much less about, but all these things are available on the web, is a bespoke study we did for UCL, the small university press, University College London, getting the best out of usage data. And here we looked at the goal was to identify practical steps that can be taken by small OA monograph publishers to make the most usage data available. And we did pretty pictures like this, tracking social media. We found where the referrals came from in social media. And so again, this can be done very inexpensively when applying the right tools. What we found was that in doing so, the company could see how a book is doing, which promotion strategies were most effective, what role is social media playing in increasing the audience, and is the press delivering on its mission and goal. But of course, there are always resource constraints, in-house technical expertise issues, and nothing is ever fast enough. And that holds for all publishers. The feedback loop of what's useful is always too long. So I'm going to skip that slide and move over to a slide on geolocational usage. And again, this is hugely interesting when we started this in 2016, because we were able to see what was happening outside of the library. And obviously this was KU and KU Research wanting to show libraries that their support for open access was getting to a readership that was broader than those who came in through the library IP address. And so that map is pretty much what you would expect. But this little slide, which takes a very small piece of data in a very particular point in time, in a very particular place, took a small number of knowledge unlatched books, and remember, in 2016 there were still a very small number that had been around long enough to take any data from. We looked at the traffic through the IP address and found 37, coming through the libraries, and then we looked at geolocational through Cambridge and Boston, and we found 556. Well, that's a huge increase in the community's usage. Now, of course, Cambridge and Boston are kind of special, but as we've moved forward, this has been repeating itself time and time again. Many multiples of usage that have somehow found, or readers have found their way to the open access books. And so we've done this on a small sample. Would love to carry on doing bigger samples of this and to see others doing it too. But as we have found yesterday and today, it's really big numbers that we have to look at in order to inform ourselves better. And while I'm passionate about open access, and I believe in open access, I'm really looking forward to smoothing the way so that the various parties and programs and interests can work together and see what happens and tackle the big questions. I mean, Rick asked a question for which there is no easy answer, as Rick always does. But, you know, books do serve a different function to journal articles, and there are going to be different views, particularly on both sides of either side of the pond and elsewhere. But we need to address those in the context of things happening and being done. So thank you very much for listening to me. I'm absolutely delighted that I share this session with Ross, because Palgrave was one of those publishers that turned me down, KU. But I was actually very pleased because they were going their own way, and people should be going their own way as well, and trying out lots of different business models. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frances. We have time for two questions. Two questions. Anthony.
Anthony. I don't know which is worse. Anthony
Quick question for...
Pardon?
Quick question for you, yes?
Okay,
and,
yeah.
At the Hefke mandate, the original setback was that quite a number of leading scholars didn't like CC BY. Has this died away now?
Sorry, who didn't like CC BY? The legal scholars.
Leading scholars. There
Didn't
was
like
a huge
CC BY.
campaign among classicists in particular.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
For the CrossIC committee, I think we've moved on. But, with the large number of CC, NC is one issue, and then ND is another issue. And I, as a publisher, have always thought it's the authors who should decide what should happen, and if they want to protect the integrity of their book through ND, that's fine. Where they don't want to give up the possibility of commercial exploitation, that's another issue to be discussed individually from publisher to author, and some publishers offer both, and some publishers only do CC BY, and there's enough variety there.
But sorry, if I could just finish that off. I thought Hefke were really keen on insisting upon CC BY.
Not for books.
Not now.
Not for books, and not now.
Okay, last question. Thank you very much, Frances.